Why your spiritual legacy is the most powerful gift you can leave behind. When you die, this is what will matter most. And Jesus said it first. I want to start with a story that hit me so hard. It changed the way I see everything. It's the story of a funeral. But not just any funeral. It was the funeral of a man nobody in the world would have called famous. No big bank account, no headlines, just a quiet old man who lived down the street. But when he died, something happened that stunned the entire town. Hundreds of people showed up, from all over the country. I was there. I saw grown men weep openly. I saw women hugging each other, whispering how this man had changed their lives. One by one, people came to the front and shared stories, not about his job or his hobbies, but about how he made them feel, how he taught them to pray, how he showed them what Jesus looks like in real life. And as I sat there, something inside me cracked open. I thought, this is power. This is impact. This is what it means to leave something behind that never dies. You and I were taught to chase money, fame, followers, but Jesus taught something different. He didn't say, "Blessed are the popular." He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." He didn't say, "Store up treasures in your bank account." He said, "Store up treasures in heaven." You know what that man left behind? A spiritual legacy. And I realized then, your spiritual legacy is the most powerful gift you can ever give the world. Not your career, not your achievements, but the light you plant in other people's hearts through your faith, your love, and your obedience to Christ. Today, I want to take you on a journey, a wild, emotional, and deeply personal journey, into discovering why your spiritual legacy matters more than you can imagine. And how Jesus laid the blueprint to leave behind something eternal, something that will echo beyond your time on earth. So let me ask you, if you disappeared tomorrow, what would remain? Let's talk about that. Imagine you're sitting at a kitchen table. A child looks up at you and asks, "Why do we pray?" Or maybe a friend calls you at midnight, drowning in anxiety, and you're the only one they trust to speak peace into their soul. Or maybe you're 85, rocking on your front porch, watching generations grow from the seeds of love you planted years ago. In those moments, your spiritual legacy is everything. Jesus didn't write books, he didn't leave behind a mansion, but his legacy has shaped billions of lives for over 2,000 years. Why? Because he didn't just live for people, he lived in people. That's the kind of legacy we're talking about. And if you're thinking, "Well, I'm not Jesus, I'm just me," I want to stop you right there. Because Jesus said in John chapter 14 verse 12, "Truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these." That's not a poetic exaggeration. That's a call to action. You and I are called to leave behind a legacy that doesn't fade when the lights go out. Let me tell you a story that still gives me chills. A woman named Maria lived in a small village. She had no formal education. She sold fruit at the market. But every child who passed her stand would walk away not just with fruit, but with a Bible verse and a prayer whispered into their heart. Years went by. Those children became leaders, parents, teachers, and one of them, a man named Eli, ended up becoming a pastor who now oversees thousands of churches. You trace it back, and it started with a woman and a fruit stand, and a heart full of Jesus. That's legacy. That's impact that can't be bought. I want to ask you a serious question, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. What seeds are you planting right now? Not just what you're achieving, but who you're becoming. Because everything about legacy begins with character. Jesus didn't just say, "Follow me." He lived a life so compelling that people wanted to follow him. They left their jobs, their homes, everything. Why? Because he gave them hope. He gave them a reason to live that was bigger than survival. That's your calling too. Legacy begins when you decide to stop living just for yourself and start living for something and someone greater. You're not too young. You're not too late. You're not too broken. Do you remember what Jesus said about the mustard seed in Matthew chapter 13? He said it's the smallest of all seeds, but when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. That mustard seed, that's your faith. That's your character. That's your legacy. You plant it small, but God grows it big. Let's be honest, we all want to be remembered, but we forget that what we do now decides how we're remembered. When I was a teenager, I had a mentor named Jordan. He wasn't flashy, he didn't speak much, but he had this incredible way of making you feel seen. He taught me how to study the Word, how to listen to God, how to live with humility. Years later, he passed away from cancer. But every time I speak, every time I love someone, every time I turn to God in prayer instead of fear, I know a piece of Jordan lives on through me. And now, I pass that on. That's the chain reaction Jesus intended. Legacy isn't built in a day. It's built daily. Every time you forgive instead of lash out, every time you choose prayer over panic, every time you show mercy to someone who doesn't deserve it, you are creating spiritual echoes that reach further than you'll ever know. You might feel like your life doesn't make a difference, but that's a lie the enemy wants you to believe. Because the moment you live for Christ, your life becomes a message, even if you never say a word. And here's something I don't want you to miss. Spiritual legacy isn't about being perfect. It's about being faithful. You can mess up, you can fall, you can doubt, but if you get back up and keep walking with Jesus, that speaks volumes. Sometimes, people are watching more closely when we struggle than when we succeed. So don't hide your battles. Let your healing become someone else's hope. Let me take you to one more story, a biblical one that's honestly one of the most powerful moments in all of Scripture. It's the story of Stephen. You'll find it in Acts 7. He was the first Christian martyr, a man full of the Holy Spirit, preaching boldly about Jesus, and because of that, he was stoned to death. Now that doesn't sound like legacy, does it? But here's the twist. One of the men standing there, holding the coats of the killers, was Saul, the same Saul who would later become Paul, the greatest evangelist the world has ever known. Stephen's death wasn't the end of his story, it was the beginning of someone else's. That's the beauty of spiritual legacy. It multiplies, it ignites, it never dies. So I ask you again, what will your story set in motion? Because the people who change the world are rarely the ones the world notices. They're the ones who change hearts, one at a time, quietly, consistently, faithfully. And friend, that could be you. The forgotten way Jesus taught us to leave a legacy that lasts forever. There's a forgotten way Jesus taught us to leave a legacy that lasts forever. And it's hidden in plain sight. When we think about leaving a legacy, we often imagine a moment of glory, a final speech, a dramatic act of sacrifice. But Jesus didn't teach legacy that way. He taught it around dinner tables, on dirt roads, in interrupted moments. He built legacy through presence, not performance. Let me take you into one of the most intimate scenes in the Gospels. It's found in John chapter 13. The disciples are gathered for what we now call the Last Supper. They don't know it yet, but Jesus does. It's his final evening with them. If this were us, maybe we'd give a grand farewell, a vision for the future, or even a last miracle. But what does Jesus do? He gets down on his knees and washes their feet. Think about that. The King of Heaven, the Son of God, the one through whom all things were made, bending down to scrub the dust, sweat, and grime off the feet of fishermen and doubters. That's not just humility, that's legacy. Because in that moment, he wasn't showing off, he was showing them how to live. He wasn't just saying, "Remember me." He was saying, "Imitate me." And here's the crazy thing. Jesus knew Peter would deny him, and Judas would betray him. And still, he washed their feet. Can you imagine what kind of legacy that left in Peter's heart? In the hearts of the other disciples? That's when it hit me. Legacy doesn't come from spotlight moments. It comes from how you treat people, especially when they don't deserve your kindness. You want to leave a legacy that echoes through generations? Start by serving the ones around you, especially the ones who hurt you. That's the Jesus way. Now let's go deeper. One of the most powerful truths Jesus taught us was that what's unseen is often more powerful than what's seen. That's why he said in Matthew chapter 6, "Do not do your acts of righteousness before others to be seen by them. Your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." That means your secret prayers matter. Your hidden kindness matters. The conversations no one applauds. The forgiveness no one sees. The generosity no one praises. That's the raw material of eternal legacy. In fact, I want to share something personal with you. Something I've never shared before. A few years ago, I was in one of the darkest places of my life. I had lost someone I loved deeply, and everything around me felt cold and meaningless. I was questioning everything, my purpose, my direction, even my faith. One night, I was walking aimlessly down a road, tears just falling, and I whispered, "God, are you even here?" And out of nowhere, I got a message. It was from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. He wrote, "Hey, I don't know why, but I felt like I should tell you. Your life and your faith saved me once. And I never got to thank you. You showed me Jesus when I wanted to give up." I fell to my knees. That message, it was like God Himself breaking through the silence. You see, you don't even know how far your impact reaches. You think no one notices. You think no one remembers. But heaven does. That old friend, he's now a youth pastor. And every soul he touches, that's part of the ripple. That's legacy. And I didn't even know it was happening. You never know what part of your obedience will change someone's eternity. Let me repeat that for someone who needs to hear it again. You never know what part of your obedience will change someone's eternity. We live in a world obsessed with results, likes, followers, numbers, but Jesus taught legacy in the small and faithful things. He said, "Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones because he is my disciple, truly I tell you, he will never lose his reward." Matthew chapter 10 verse 42. Let me ask you something. Are you chasing approval? Or are you chasing eternity? Because you can spend your whole life trying to be successful, and still be forgotten the moment you're gone. But if you live for the kingdom, if you love like Jesus, if you disciple even one soul faithfully, you will never be forgotten in heaven. And when that's your goal, everything changes. I want to take you into the story of a man named Joseph. Not Mary's husband. I'm talking about Joseph of Arimathea. He appears for just a moment in the Gospels. But what he did changed history. After Jesus was crucified, everyone fled. Most of the disciples were hiding. But Joseph, a wealthy man and secret follower of Jesus, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. He then gave up his own tomb so Jesus could be buried with honor. Did you catch that? In the most crucial moment, Joseph gave Jesus a resting place, a place that would become the starting point of the resurrection. That tomb is empty today, and millions of people visit it, not knowing the name of the man who gave it, but heaven knows. Sometimes the most powerful legacies are written in moments of quiet courage. And here's what's wild. What you think is just a small act of faith might be the launchpad for resurrection in someone else's life. You may never know whose life you're saving by speaking that truth, giving that gift, or offering that forgiveness, but God knows, and the kingdom multiplies it. So what's the real secret to legacy? It's not fame, it's not platforms, it's discipleship. Jesus didn't just save people, he discipled them. He poured into 12 ordinary men who then turned the world upside down. He said, "Go and make disciples of all nations." Matthew chapter 28 verse 19. That's the Great Commission. That's the eternal mission. I know we're all busy. I know life gets chaotic. But what if I told you that the most meaningful thing you can ever do is invest in one soul with the love of Jesus? It could be your child, your spouse, a coworker, a friend who's drifting, a neighbor you've ignored. That one relationship could be the key to a spiritual legacy that outlives you. And don't wait for the perfect moment. It's always the right time to plant spiritual seeds. Look at the thief on the cross next to Jesus. In his final breaths, he turned to Jesus and said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "Today you will be with me in paradise." That man had minutes left, but even then, his life became a testimony that still speaks today. So what's stopping you? You've got time, you've got a voice, you've got a story, you've got a savior. That's more than enough. And maybe you're thinking, "But I've made so many mistakes. I've wasted so much time." Can I tell you something? God is the only one who can take a wasted life and turn it into a wellspring of legacy. He doesn't need perfection. He just needs surrender. The Apostle Paul started out as a murderer of Christians, and God used him to write most of the New Testament. That's redemption. That's grace. That's legacy. God is not finished with you. Right now, in this moment, you have the power to change the direction of generations. You don't need to be famous. You just need to be faithful. Faithful to the word, faithful to love, faithful to show up even when it's hard. Because one day, when you take your final breath, your bank account won't speak. Your followers won't matter, but the people you loved into healing, the ones you pointed to Jesus, the legacy of light you carried, that will still be speaking. Long after you're gone. And one day, you'll stand before the throne. And if you've lived not for applause but for eternity, you'll hear the words we all long to hear. "Well done, good and faithful servant." So I challenge you, today, not tomorrow. Start building your spiritual legacy. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. Pray for someone, forgive someone, tell your story, teach someone how to seek God, love the unlovable, serve in the shadows, and watch what God does with it. Because when you live for the kingdom, the echoes never die. The final revelation that could change your entire legacy, forever. This is it, the final revelation that could change your entire legacy, forever. By now, you've heard the stories, you've seen how Jesus lived, you've felt the weight of what it means to leave behind more than just memories. But what I'm about to share with you now, it goes even deeper. It's the heart of legacy, the soul of it, the reason why your spiritual legacy is not only powerful, it's eternal. I want to take you to a moment in Jesus' life that most people overlook. It's the Garden of Gethsemane. Late at night, quiet, still, the disciples are sleeping, and Jesus is alone, crying, sweating blood, agonizing over what's coming, the cross, the betrayal, the pain. He could have walked away. He could have chosen safety, but in that moment, he said the words that echoed through time. "Father, not my will, but yours be done." That sentence, that surrender, is the foundation of all spiritual legacy. Because here's the truth. Your legacy doesn't start with what you build. It starts with what you surrender. You don't build something eternal by doing things your way. You build it by laying down your will. your ego, your comfort, your control, and saying, "God, have your way in me." That's how Jesus changed the world. And you and I, we're invited to follow the same path. You see, legacy is not about what you leave behind. It's about who you leave behind you. Who have you discipled? Who have you loved so deeply, so consistently, so Christ-like, that they're now carrying the light forward? I want you to pause right now and really think about that. Who are you influencing today that will carry a piece of Christ because of you tomorrow? Because that's the fruit Jesus talked about in John chapter 15. I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit. Fruit that will last. Let me tell you the story of Martha. Not the biblical Martha, though her story is powerful too, but a modern-day one. She was a woman in her late 70s, and she never had kids of her own. She wasn't a preacher, she wasn't famous, but every Wednesday night, she opened her tiny apartment to a group of teenagers who didn't fit in anywhere else. She fed them, she listened to them, she read the Bible with them, she prayed over them like a warrior. Years passed. One of those kids became a missionary. Another became a counselor. Another became a mom who now opens her home just like Martha did. None of it made headlines. But when Martha died, her funeral overflowed with stories. Stories of lives rescued from addiction, marriages healed, people who didn't take their own lives because someone chose to love them. That's legacy. And here's the best part. All of it came from one woman and one simple decision to open her door. So let me ask you now, what door do you need to open? Maybe it's not physical. Maybe it's the door to your heart. Maybe it's time to let someone in, to forgive, to begin mentoring, to invite someone to church, to speak that truth you've been holding in. The world doesn't need more influencers. It needs more imitators of Christ. People who don't just say they believe, but who live it out in love. People like you. You might feel small, but the smallest candle still pushes back the darkest night. And remember this, God doesn't measure legacy the way the world does. We look at numbers, He looks at names. You might never go viral, but if you lead one soul to Jesus, all of heaven rejoices. Don't you see? You were never meant to just exist. You were born to leave a trail of light behind you. Light that keeps burning long after your time on earth is over. Because eternity doesn't begin when you die. It begins the moment you say yes to Jesus. That yes, that surrender, is where legacy begins. I want to take you to the final moment of Jesus' life on earth. After His resurrection, right before He ascended, picture it. The disciples are standing on a hill, still stunned, still unsure what comes next. And Jesus doesn't say, "Build a monument." He doesn't say, "Write about me." He says one thing: "Go and make disciples." It was His final command, His parting words. That's how much your spiritual legacy matters to Him. It's not optional, it's your calling. And don't let that scare you. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to walk alongside someone and say, "Let's follow Jesus together." Because your story, yes, your story, is the bridge someone else needs to cross from despair to hope. Let me share one final story with you. It's one that still brings tears to my eyes. A man named Thomas was a prisoner. He had done horrible things. He thought God could never forgive him. But in prison, he met another man, an older inmate who had given his life to Christ. This man didn't preach, he didn't judge, he simply showed Thomas what love looked like. He prayed with him, he read the Bible with him, he told him about grace. Years passed, Thomas was released. Today, Thomas runs a ministry for at-risk youth. He's helped prevent over 300 kids from going to prison. And do you know what he says every time he's asked what changed his life? "I saw Jesus," in a man behind bars. That's the legacy you're capable of. A legacy not of perfection, but of redemption. Because that's what Christ does. He takes what's broken and makes it beautiful. He takes your past and turns it into someone else's future. You want to leave a spiritual legacy? Live a redeemed life. Live a surrendered life. Live a life that points people back to the one who saved you. And don't wait. Don't wait for the stage, the spotlight, the moment. Your moment is now. Right here, right now, you can choose to be the spark that lights someone's world on fire for God. Right here, right now, you can choose to live with eternity in mind. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you never achieve anything the world praises, but you live a life that reflects Jesus. If you never become rich, but you make someone feel seen and loved in the name of Christ. If you never get recognized, but you teach your children to pray, to trust, to walk with God. Then friend, you will have lived a life of eternal impact. That's what matters. That's what lasts. Heaven and earth will pass away, Jesus said, but my words will never pass away. Let His words shape your legacy. And one day, when you enter that eternal kingdom, you'll see the ripple effects. Faces you never met, hearts you never knew you touched, welcoming you home. Because you said yes. Because you lived like Him. Because you dared to believe that your spiritual legacy is the most powerful gift you could ever leave behind. And you were right. So now, what will you do with that truth? Because the clock is ticking. The world is watching. The kingdom is waiting. And your legacy? It starts today.